Hello YouTube, this is Matt Pullen, and this is a video that is a follow-up to my video on my thoughts on the 5A3 Grand Prix Sicilian. My knowledge of the 5A3 Grand Prix Sicilian, as I mentioned in the first video, originated from Michael Geller's website, the Kenilworthian, or rather the website of his chess club, the Kenilworthian. Basically, in this position, after e6, which is one of the main moves that black plays here, there are several other moves which I talked about in the previous one. The move b4, the delayed wing gambit, looks attractive because it aims to open up the weakened dark squares from the queen side. There's another move which I'm going to talk about in this video, d4, which aims to exploit the weakened dark squares from the center. But first, let me go back to b4, and we'll wrap up some things. My first video was kind of rushed, to get under 11 minutes. After b6, which I think is the best move, maintaining the tension on c5, Geller gives a wide range of defenses in his articles, which you could read if you were interested in this opening. Another one of the lines he gives is playing d5 as a center counter right away. And after pawn to e5, which is thematic, trying to focus on the dark squares, black can just try and challenge this head on with f6. And he's got all these forces behind the e5 point, and it's very hard to reinforce that point. And if white just trades off, like plays pawn takes f6, then after the simple knight takes f6 is white pushed a center pawn too many times and just traded off. Black will end up with all the center pawns in the game. The only move is bishop to b5, which tries to maintain, it fights to maintain the control over the e5 point, but by playing the bishop out to b5, it almost guarantees this will be traded off for the knight. Geller says this is interesting. I agree. It's interesting, but I'm only going to talk about b6 and d5, which I feel is the best defense. So after e5, there aren't really any better moves. I mean, the pawn capture, as Geller discusses, the pawn capture does not benefit white because black will be able to use the b file more easily. After e5. With the idea of focusing on the dark squares, I really like this d5 defense. If takes en passant is not really threatening for black. See, I don't even know what I'd play here. Maybe, yeah, probably best just to take this. I don't know. It seems like black is becoming boss, especially on the long diagonal there. Don't see any redeeming qualities for white's position. So, I mean, white has to try and maintain this pawn chain, right? After h4, which is what Geller suggested, h5 is the line that I recommended. It essentially totally locks up the king side and allows this strong knight maneuver to the powerful f5 square. See, some ideas here. Why do I think that white is not better here? Well, one of the reasons in general I think that white is not better here, his center is advanced and can be easily blockaded. His pawn chain is not going anywhere. Whereas black's center, he has two pawns next to each other, and his center is still fluid. He could conceivably push either one of these pawns to try and make some headway in the game. See, some ideas here. d4 succeeds in fixing the center. After c takes and knight b5, I don't know. This knight is maybe will land on d6 for check, but what's it going to do there? Black can just play his own knight to f5 to challenge it away, or pull the bishop back to f8. C takes b4 is also possible. Like on a takes. If knight takes b4, then this is kind of iffy because of bishop a3, and a5 is not possible because of the weak rook. But instead of taking this pawn, just playing bishop to b7. Now this really threatens to take the pawn because now the rook is held. So, I mean, there's a fixed center, but still, it looks like after like an eventual rook c8 gets played, white will have some issues on the c file, which is backward now. And of course, eventually the knight will come and maybe gain some more pressure on d4. So that d4 right away to fix the center is not mandatory. White can also play rook to b1, but I mean, rook to b1 is just a chess move. White is maintaining his point, on b4, contesting c5, and he puts his rook on an openable file. I mean, it keeps white in the game, yes, but I mean, I don't think that white can really claim any advantage from this. And besides, I much prefer black's game strategically after knight h6, knight f5. So yeah, this is why I don't like the b4 delayed wing gambit here. But in this video, I'm going to take a look at another line, d4, sort of the central pawn gambit. Geller also mentions this, not in as much detail as b4, but I think that this would be my choice over b4 because of course of the flaky position that white can get if black knows the b6 and d5 line very well. See, after c takes d4, it looks like it's a pawn gambit, but because of the weakened dark squares, white can play knight to b5, and this pawn actually is probably coming back, because if d5 is actually an interesting try, d5 here. White can play to win the d6 square, but after f6, knight to d6 check, king f7, I mean king e7 here. I mean, white's center is falling apart, and this knight probably will end up having to trade off for the bishop on c8. And black has all these pawns in the center now, and I just think that is maybe better to play knight b takes d4 here. And again, I'm not sure what's going on here myself. After f takes e, f takes e, it appears that this pawn on e5 is rather tricky to take because black has some weaknesses in his center. Like after bishop takes e5, there's bishop b5, pinning the knight and threatening to win the bishop. So like bishop takes and then queen takes, and there's ugly stuff going on here. Yeah. So after knight takes e5, there's bishop to b5 check, which is also quite annoying because if bishop d7, then white has knight takes on e6. So again, I'm really not sure what's going on in that position. It's worth some study. This d4 center gambit is quite interesting. Geller draws some comparisons actually between this and the English opening, which I actually looked up a line in the English opening that in my Tony Costin book. And say after knight f6, black goes into the 3 knights with bishop c5. Costin recommends a3 here. Looks odd, but the purpose is to keep the knight off of b4. If e3 instead, to prepare the pawn chain to hit the bishop, then black has this resource, which is very similar to what we just looked at, d5. And after c takes d5, knight b4, with the object of winning the pawn back, or maybe jumping into d3. However, I found that Costin didn't actually, he said this knight's just going to take back and play c6 with a very reasonable Sicilian structure. He doesn't mention that white has queen b3 here, though. Of course, I don't know, this is a very interesting line. I think after c6, trying to crack open the d file and play an effective knight to d3 check, I think black is okay here. But still, it is a very interesting collection of lines, these, this d4 counter gambit. Like here here after e6, d4. This I think is what I would play if I played this a3 line. I mean, I don't think the a3 line is really that great, but it's good for surprise value. Is not too risky for white, because he can always go into this d4 line, which I think is kind of solid. I think the best black has here is just to play pawn takes and then play d6. And here, knight takes d4 threatens to trade, and then take on d6 for check. So it does achieve, the trade of the Sicilian knight on c6. Then a6 can be played to stop the bishop from coming to b5. But then after c3, maybe e5 is possible. Geller doesn't mention this, but it seems like black can reach a very reasonable Najdorf structure from here. Anyway, I'm about to run out of time again. These have been some of my thoughts on the a3 Grand Prix attack in the Sicilian. Hope you enjoyed, and talk to you next time.